Hello, everyone, and welcome to Radical Thinker, the place where we challenge Western media narratives and perspectives. Today is Sunday, 19th of April, and we are entering day 51 of the American and Israeli war imposed on the Islamic Republic of Iran. In the past 24 hours, we saw that Iran is very serious about closing again the Strait of Hormuz. They have fired warning shots at two Indian oil tankers who were attempting to cross the strait, and it seems that they were not taking initially very seriously the fact that Iran has decided to close the strait once again. So warning shots have been fired and the Indian ships have retreated, and as it is for now on Sunday, the Strait of Hormuz is closed and completely under the control of the Revolutionary Guards Navy force. Besides this, we are seeing that the negotiations with the United States have practically collapsed. There is no talk anymore about having a new meeting in the following days in Islamabad in Pakistan, because as we saw, the Americans continue to have this type of maximalist demands from Iran, and Iran is really serious about not giving anything in on the negotiation table, because as they already said, what they managed to gain during the fighting, during the war, they are not going to give for free during the negotiations with the Americans. Also, it seems that the Iranians are preparing for the moment when the United States and Israel will resume the hostilities. And then most probably through the Ansarullah forces from Yemen, they are going to close the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which will be chess move very important in this conflict, would really put a lot of pressure on the Americans and on its Western allies if this would really happen and would materialize. The Iranians are also preparing for the moment when the Americans and the Israelis most probably are going to renew the hostilities, and they have another ace in their sleeves, and this ace is the closure of the Strait of the Bab el-Mandeb Strait, which would happen with the support of the Ansarullah forces from Yemen, which are known in the West as the Houthis. So this is another master's move that Iran could make in the following days if the Americans are going to start the war again against the Islamic Republic of Iran, which is very possible that this is going to happen, because we are seeing a lot of airplanes flying from the west to the Middle East. We are seeing more and more troops being brought in the region by the Americans, which means most probably that they are going to try again a ground invasion or some special operation which would involve the use of ground troops, and this is very possible that it could start probably in one week or two from now. Yesterday we had the opportunity of seeing the clarifications which came from the Iranian authorities through the Speaker of the Parliament, Mr. Kalibaf. He clarified some things related to the negotiations which took place in Pakistan and all the events which surrounded these negotiations. He said that the Strait of Hormuz is going to be kept under the control of the Islamic Republic of Iran. He also said that Iran firmly confronted America's attempt to sweep mines in the Strait of Hormuz, considering it a violation of the ceasefire, and advanced to the point of engagement, but the enemy retreated. So the Americans basically forced the strait under the pretext that they wanted to remove some sweep mines, but Iran was strong and they managed to force the Americans to get out of the strait, at least for now. Kalibaf continued and said that if there is going to be any type of traffic in the strait in the following days, all of it will happen under the supervision of the Iranian Revolutionary Guards. The Americans have announced a blockade for a few days now, but this is clumsy. And it's also an ignorant decision. It is impossible for others to pass through the Strait of Hormuz while Iran cannot. This is very true. Kalibaf is right. The Iranians are never going to allow for the strait to be opened for all the countries, but closed for them. So this stupid decision that Washington made to impose a naval blockade on Iran was one of the worst decisions made in this conflict, and it will only force the Iranians to become more aggressive and more determined to make less and less concessions during the negotiations, if we are going to see another round of negotiations in the following days. So for now we have a naval blockade, and we also have the Strait of Hormuz being closed, which basically renders more or less the naval blockade imposed by the Americans useless for now. I'm sure that Iran has different plans. They have different routes which they are going to use for their ships in order to deliver the oil to their international clients, and they are not going to succumb to American pressures and to this medieval style of siege, which is a naval blockade. Last time when we saw a naval blockade of this magnitude, if we are to keep the proportions with the current events, was in the 18th century when the British imposed a naval blockade against the Chinese during the Opium Wars. So for people who know a little bit of history, what happens now rings some bells in terms of colonialism and neo-colonialism. And as I said a while ago, even the nuclear agreement signed during the Obama era, the JCPOA, and the fact that the Americans have the audacity to think that they can impose on other countries what they can do inside their borders, and if they can have nuclear technology, and even the thing that they can impose on countries to have or not to have nuclear weapons. This is ridiculous and is a remnant of the colonial era when the West thought that it had ultimate power and it can impose its will on any other civilization from the planet. But unfortunately, the Iranians at that time, they were somehow constrained by economical reasons and the fact that the Americans still had a lot of leverage when it comes to sanctions and when it comes to having the ability of controlling international economic operations. So therefore, Iran was somehow forced to enter negotiations, which ended with signing the JCPOA agreement that Trump, when he came in power during his first term as president of the United States, he ripped apart. And slowly but slowly, we reached the current situation when Iran is under the American and Israeli war, and when the Americans, although they seem to lose the war, they still have maximalist demands and they think that they can achieve anything. And Trump keeps repeating this nonsense about Iran sending its uranium stockpile to the Americans. Also, on the other side, we have the Russians who want somehow to calm down things, and they have offered to keep for a while the enriched uranium in Russia. An offer which has been for now rejected by the Iranians. The Iranians have in their mindset what happened with the chemical weapons that Syria once had as a deterrent against Israel, and at that time during the imposed civil war on Syria, the Americans, through the Russians, forced Bashar al-Assad, at that time the president of Syria, to give up on its chemical stockpile and send it back to Russia, thinking that this will calm things down and will make the Americans concede. We saw that this absolutely didn't happen, and in the end, Bashar al-Assad was forced to leave Damascus, and we have now a complete shit show in Syria, where, by the way, in the past days we saw the beginning of some economic protests. People in Damascus are protesting because the economy is not going well. Even if some sanctions have been removed, there is a lot of poverty in Syria. Now there is a lot of corruption, and the new Jolani regime, let's call it like this, because this is a fancy word that Western media likes to use when it comes to the countries in the Middle East. The regime, the Jolani regime in Damascus, seems to be incapable of fixing the Syrian economy, so a lot of problems for Syria. So going back to Iran, they know what happens if they are going to give up on their uranium stockpile. They would become very vulnerable, even to the extent that without possessing this uranium stockpile, at some point the Americans and most probably the Israelis would find it very easily for them to use even a nuclear weapon against Iran in order to force the Iranians to capitulate. So for now, Iran seems very serious about keeping its stockpile, about fighting hard to keep their legal international right to possess nuclear technology, to develop nuclear plants, to have nuclear energy, to use nuclear energy for various scientific and medical purposes is their legitimate right, and there is no law on this planet coming from the United Nations or from other internationally recognized body which says that Iran should be banned from having access to nuclear technology. It's just the Americans coming up with this ludicrous statements and with this type of demands, which are not even related to American interests and strategy in the region. No, as we saw and as we know, everything is related to what the Israelis want to achieve and to the fact that Israel doesn't want to see an Iranian state which possesses nuclear weapons. And if they are not possessing nuclear weapons, they don't even want to accept an Iranian state capable of building nuclear weapons or an Iranian state which has nuclear energy. They want to have the monopoly in the region. They want to be sure that they can be the wild beast of the Middle East and that they can at any moment crush any country which might interfere with their interests. So this is what Israel wants, and Israel has for now the influence to put the war machine in the United States in motion against the Iranians, and this is why I am predicting that probably in a couple of days, maybe 1 week from now, unfortunately we are going to see the resumption of the hostilities. As I said, the Americans are bringing more technology, more airplanes and more troops into the region. The Israelis have sort of a break when it comes to Lebanon, although yesterday, of course, as Israel always does, they broke the ceasefire and they demolished some villages in the southern part of Lebanon. Also, one UNIFIL French soldier was killed yesterday in Lebanon, and the Joker president of France was quick to blame Hezbollah for the killing of this soldier. Hezbollah, of course, denied it and advised the French to do a research before accusing Hezbollah of being behind the killing of this soldier. Because as recent events tell us, when it comes about attacks on UNIFIL troops in southern Lebanon, these have been constantly committed by the Israeli armed forces, and they have a history of being very aggressive, not only with the Lebanese resistance, not only with the Lebanese army, but also with the UNIFIL forces present in that area. Also, Israel has announced that they want to impose a yellow line on the Gaza model in the southern part of Lebanon. And what does it mean, this yellow line? It means that they want to have a certain perimeter in the southern part of Lebanon where they can destroy all the civilian infrastructure at their will. But Hezbollah has announced that it is not going to permit a return to the scenario which was active from 2024 until the war started like 1 month ago, the war between Israel and Lebanon, and that Hezbollah is willing to answer to any type of aggression coming from the Israeli side. And they did it yesterday when they killed one Israeli soldier, one occupier in the southern part of Lebanon. So the strategy will change. If for around 1 year and a half, Hezbollah kept the ceasefire and they didn't engage in open warfare with Israel, although the Israelis were killing Hezbollah soldiers and they were bombing key Hezbollah assets for more than 1 year and a half. The Hezbollah fighters didn't answer until 1 month ago, when they decided that enough is enough and that it's better for them strategically to join the war. Once for supporting Iran, because Iran was at war, attacked by the Americans and the Israelis, but also to change the status quo, to impose a new equation against the Israelis, and to force the Israelis to rethink their strategy in the southern part of Lebanon, and to rethink that they have the ability or the green light to kill Lebanese people every day with impunity, in fact, without having to suffer losses. It seems that this time Hezbollah has a different strategy. They have been very effective in the war, which lasted for 1 month. Both the American and Iranian ceasefire and also the Israeli and Lebanese ceasefires are very light, are very slim, and they can end at any time. We are seeing the tension ramping up once again by the fact that the Americans, although they were talking about negotiations and finding a common ground with the Iranian side, they had this bright idea to impose a naval blockade on Iran. And then Iran was forced also to answer, because Iran is continuously answering to the aggressive actions coming from the Americans. So they closed the Strait of Hormuz once again. And this will only lead to more tensions in the area, and we are not going to see for now a return to normality. And the more the time passes, the more the international economy is suffering. We are seeing the oil prices going up and up. There is a lot of instability on the oil markets, and we are seeing the first signs that Western countries start to suffer from lack of key energetical resources, which they were purchasing from the Middle East. I'm happy that the Iranian side came with clarifications, because for like 2 or 3 days we were seeing only Trump's statements, and we didn't know exactly if Iran conceded, if they capitulated or not, and what happened. Mr. Kalibaf, the speaker of the Iranian parliament, clarified most of the things. The Iranians are not willing, and they are not thinking about giving up their uranium enriched stockpile. They are not going to make big concessions when it comes to their nuclear program. They are not going to give up on their allies in the Middle East. They are not going to limit the range or the technology of their ballistic missiles and drones. So it seems that the Americans would need to rethink well what they want to do when it comes to Iran. They still have the option of starting the war again, but we saw that the first time didn't work too well for them, and their plan of the regime change, the American plan of regime change, because the Israeli plan was the destruction of the Iranian state and the Iranian society, it didn't work. So if they want to try again, okay, try again, but Iran is well prepared for now. And the most important thing is that the Iranian leadership, they have popular support for fighting against the Americans and the Israelis, which is very important, because if a leadership doesn't have the popular support, then somehow they are forced to back down, they are forced to come to the negotiating table and to accept unreasonable demands coming from the other side. But in our case, the Iranian society itself is having enough from the Americans and from the Israelis, and they are demanding their leadership to fight this type of aggression and not to back down and not to make concessions. This is my update for today, Sunday, 19th of April. If you have certain subjects that you want me to touch on, write me in the comments. If you like my content, like, subscribe and follow. Until tomorrow, I'm wishing you all the best.